Now, despite billions of pounds in spending and countless initiatives by both Conservative and Labour governments, the gap between rich and poor in the UK is bigger now than it was 40 years ago. A new study has found persistent and deep-seated differences. And our home editor, Mark Easton, is here with the details. Mark.
George, there will always be some inequality in a society, but research shows that the gap matters because greater inequality is linked to more kids dropping out of school, more violent crime, and more babies dying and more mental illness. The more equal a society is, the happier it tends to be. But despite 20 years of political promises to improve the situation, the UK remains one of the most unequal countries in the developed world, with far greater inequality than Denmark, the Netherlands, France or Germany.
Inequalities reinforce themselves across the life cycle, all the way from cradle to grave. Now, I think most political parties aspire to the idea of equality of opportunity. What we suggest is that creating that equality of opportunity is very hard when there are such big differences in the resources available to individuals and their families to help them realise their potential.
So here's what happened to men's weekly earnings over the last 40 years. The poorest 10% have seen a slight increase in their income in real terms. The midpoint of the income range, that's also risen slightly. But since 1980, the top 10% of earners have seen their income more than double. The gap widened until around 2002 when it flattened out, but as you can see, shows no signs of narrowing. Today's report says it was the mid-80s which saw a very steep growth in inequality, with the rich becoming significantly richer.
Don't let the people who take to the streets...
In the 90s, John Major promised a classless society, and Tony Blair said his politics would allow everyone to move up the social ladder. But despite billions being spent to help those at the bottom, today's report suggests that, if anything, the link between class and educational attainment is widening.
This is a sobering report, and whilst inequality is not growing in the way that it was before we came into government, and whilst we've tackled poverty, particularly for families with young children and pensioners, the report shows that there's still not an equal chance for everyone.
I think this is a deeply shocking report. It shows that inequality in this country is highest amongst the many developed countries across the world, shows that inequality got much greater under the last Conservative government, and that Labour have failed to improve the situation.
We've got the highest gap between rich and poor since the Second World War. We can't go on like this. We need a change, and that change is a Conservative government that would be dealing with the causes of poverty, like worklessness and educational failure.
Well, it takes at least a generation for political policies to create the social change needed to address inequality. But such measures will always be controversial because they mean neutralising the advantages of wealth, a prospect that those with money and influence will fight hard against. George.
Thank you, Mark. A 43-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the bodies of two